Hey singers, time for another singer spotlight, and today I'm wearing my 10-plus-year-old shirt for the band Raw for a reason, because we have my good friend Ben Carroll. Now, Ben and I, we don't see each other much. I haven't saw you in maybe 7 or 8 years, but someone I love dearly, and I consider him one of my closest friends. We actually tried to tackle a project years ago called Rock Source 360, but it was just too much, and we do a lot of things on our own, but we still stay in touch. But the reason I'm having Ben on today, most of you might know him as the lead guitarist for the band Ra, but he's also an amazing singer, and I like to, pat myself on the back. I feel like I had a little bit to do with that, because I kind of nudged him in that direction. So I just want to talk with Ben today about that. And Ben, how you doing? How you been? It's been a few months since we talked.
I'm great, man. I'm really good. Thanks for having me. And you kind of nudged me by pushing me up to a cliff and pushing me off the edge.
Yeah.
The hell of a nudge.
But it worked out very, very well. And we'll get to that. But I want to kind of start with, it is a little different singer spotlight because you are a guitarist who became a singer, but I still want to go back to your roots and talk about, how you got into music, who influenced you, and then if any singers influenced you years ago, how you got into Raw and all that good stuff. So I'll hand it over to you and let you tell us the story.
Cool. Well, I was actually a singer before I was a guitar player. I sang in a band in the eighth grade.
I didn't know that.
For just a couple of months, but in the eighth grade, that seems like forever.
Well, what kind of music were you singing in the eighth grade?
Rock music.
Okay.
I only remember a Motley Crue song. I don't remember anything else we played. I know it's just modern rock of my eighth grade days. But yeah, then I picked up the guitar. I think at that point I had a guitar, but I had just got a guitar, and then I was taking guitar lessons, but then that became my main focus once I discovered like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai and those things. That guitar became the main inspiration of my life for a little while, and yeah, played practiced a lot all through high school. Guitar, I pretty much stopped singing and just played guitar through high school, and then got out of high school, went to Berkeley, and got out of Berkeley. I dropped out of Berkeley because I got to a point where I felt like all the stuff I was learning, I was only going to use it if I was going to be teaching at Berkeley. So I was like, all right, I can see where this is going, but I kind of want to play in a rock band, so I'm gonna leave school for a little while and see what I can get going on. And a couple years later, I was signed to Universal with Ra, and the rest is history.
Well, how'd you get that Raw gig?
I met Sahaj on the internet. I had a band right out of Berkeley. I was in another rock band, a heavily Tool kind of influenced band, and that band lasted about a year or so, and then band broke up, and I was looking for just the perfect band, for months, like 3 or 4 months. I was just looking. Ideally, for the perfect singer, ideally, because the band could have been formed around the singer. And I found Sahaj on the internet. He had an ad posted. He was like influences like Metallica and the Police and U2 and Korn. I was like, that's perfect. Like eclectic influences that were some of the bands I was listening to, a lot at the time, like Korn, and throughout my whole life, like the Police. And I was like, all right, this gig is mine. So he was in Jersey, I was in Massachusetts at the time, and I drove down to audition, and we hit it off, and I joined the band. And the second time I drove down, I didn't leave. I lived in New Jersey for a while, lived in our rehearsal studio, and that went on for a little while. I lived in the rehearsal studio for a few months, and then I ended up renting a room someplace. And then we were playing some places around New York City. Just your local band stuff, playing to like the bartenders and Sahaj's wife. And then I had a lot of friends in the Boston music scene, so we got some we booked a gig. We actually played the festival Nemo, which is not the Pixar movie. It's a music festival out of Boston, an industry festival, and I had invited specifically. It was a little bit further south than where I used to play all the time, but I invited some friends out, and specifically one friend who I knew could be. He was actually the singer for the band I was in before I was in Raw, and he had a really good connection with one of the DJs at WAAF who used to have us in the studio once in a while in the other band that I was in. And I got him to come down to that show because I knew he would really dig it, and I gave him what we were running with as a demo at the time after the show, and he gave it directly to the DJ from WAAF in Boston, Mistress Carrie, and she loved it, and she started spinning "Do You Call My Name," and within a matter of weeks we had the #1 song on the station, and we released an album and sold like 10,000 copies in 6 weeks or something like that. And we signed Universal. We went from playing a club to like bartenders and one person to having lines wrapped around the building in a matter of less than 2 months.
Yeah, the Do You Call My Name was it was amazing. I remember I used to work construction, and I was working in Athens, Ohio, and it came on the radio, and it just grabbed me, that na 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 na, and hearing Sahaj's voice, because everything had kind of turned to screaming. I mean, there were some singers like David Draymond who would mix up the screaming with singing, and David had a very solid voice. I love Disturbed. But when I heard Sahaj, it was like his range, even in Do You Call My Name, wasn't much higher, but it was just like up here. It's floating more in the mid to upper range, and it just grabbed you. And it was a really, really catchy song, which kind of brings me to how we met. Well, you can tell the story of how we met. All I can say is I probably stalked you guys, because I was writing my first book, Raise Your Voice, and I saw you at a festival in Ironton, Ohio, an outdoor festival. And when you Mini Kiss had opened for you.
Yeah.
And my book wasn't done yet, so I had to print it out and gave it to Sahaj, and I bought this T-shirt and had you guys sign it, but I've washed it and wore it so much, of course it wore off. And I thought, man, Sahaj was just kind of put off. I just thought, man, this guy don't even like me. He thinks I'm a dork. But somehow I stayed in contact with him and kept seeing you guys, and we became friends. So how do you remember the story?
Well, I remember Mini Kiss very well, because that was like a once in a lifetime gig. How many times does Mini Kiss open up for you? But then, I remember meeting you. There was a place we used to play in West Virginia fairly regularly, a couple times a year.
There's the Monkey Bar in Huntington, West Virginia.
And hanging out with you there and getting burgers a couple different times. And and I remember when your book came out, you gave Sahaj a copy, and I remember reading that section of it at least, which I have the book right there now, somewhere in my pile of things. Oh, there it is. Yep, that and the second one.
Yeah, well, of course you had to read the second one because you wrote an article for it.
Yeah. So yeah, and you and I just ended up keeping in touch.
So what was the turning event? Can you tell me about why you became a singer, how you became a singer, what went on with there? You had Raw, but apparently you had some other stuff you wanted to do, or maybe Raw was slowing down. Just kind of explain that to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, after releasing several albums with Ra, it seemed like the band was just kind of struggling to stay where we were, which was to the point where we were doing okay, but not quite making enough to survive. And that, at that point, Sahaj started producing other bands, and I moved to Maine just because I was sick of everything. Which I'm still here. I moved to Maine because I was gonna live here for like 6 months and figure things out, and now it's 6 years later.
Yeah.
I'm still here. But I finished up when I first got here. The first thing I wanted to do was finish up my instrumental album, A Dream Between Two Fires, and I finished that up, and I was rehearsing it. I was practicing the songs on it because I was going to put together a live version of that. And as I was coming up the stairs one day before teaching some lessons, which I've always taught guitar lessons for the past 20 years. Yeah, it's been
Wow.
20 years. Holy crap. 21 years.
That
Because
time flies.
I started teaching when I started Berkeley when I was 17.
Wow. Yeah, I've been on 19 years, so I feel your pain.
Well, it's great. But yeah, I was coming up the stairs with a glass of water, and I missed the top step, and I fell forward, and I dislocated this finger. It was at a 90-degree angle,
I remember that.
and I couldn't play. For months, I couldn't play, and I don't remember how it transpired. You were like, "All right, I'm going to teach you how to sing. We're going to work on some vocals."
No, 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 let's back up because you had a singer or you were searching for singers.
Oh yeah, that's right. I asked you. I was like, do you have any students that are really good? Because I'm trying to get something new going. Yeah, and you're like, you don't need a singer. You can totally sing. And I was like, all right, sure, whatever. So do you have any singers that are? And then when I dislocated my finger, shortly after that, we started working on voice lessons, and that was the spring of 2009.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah, I started. We worked together every couple weeks for a little while. I don't remember exactly how often it was. Everything's blurry from that time period, I guess. We worked together fairly regularly for a little while, and then after I got more comfortable with my own voice, because I'd sang background vocals in Ra, and I didn't completely stop singing. It just wasn't my main focus, and I wasn't exactly confident. I think the confidence was the biggest thing I was missing. Confidence is probably the most important thing, and I didn't have much of it with my voice. By myself, I was comfortable singing buried in the mix with Sahaj singing in front of me, but when it came to singing out front, I was like, no way. But we started working on it, and I started recording some songs, and then I started playing some shows, and I got way more comfortable with it. And it's just a process of just allowing yourself to become comfortable with it. And as I sang more, my voice became more comfortable and stronger, carrying the notes without my voice wavering. And working. I still use some of the lesson material that we have. When I need a longer warm up, or I really need to, if I haven't sang for a while and I really need to work on my voice, I will go back, and there's one set of lesson stuff in particular which I still use that fairly regularly.
Well,
it was from like 2012 too.
You were very diligent. A lot of students, they don't apply themselves, but you stayed on top of it and you really let it sink in. And I would call you up and you're like, I just did my run. I sang all my songs. I did the ultimate vocal warm up or whatever you was working on at the time. And I could hear it. And as you started singing, I guess a lot of people, when a guitar player is in a band, like Richie Sambora is in Bon Jovi, and then he puts out a solo album, people assume it's going to sound like Bon Jovi. So it didn't, thankfully. I mean, I love Bon Jovi, don't get me wrong. So I'm sure a lot of people assumed that Ben Carroll would sound like Ra. Totally different, and I loved it. I love the fact that you somehow skipped ahead a step, because most singers have so much trouble finding their own voice, but you seem to find it right out the gate. You knew what you wanted to do. You just flowed with it. How did you do that? How did you know, like with the Hollow Glow material, that was the way you were going to sing? What led you in that direction?
There was actually no thought to it. My intent was never to sound like anybody else. I at that point, I had been a professional musician for a decade, so I didn't really feel like I had anything to prove musically, but I was very uncomfortable with my voice, so I just kind of, I started off by working on a bunch of cover songs. I learned a bunch of Beatles songs, a bunch of Alice in Chains songs, and a handful of other things. But it was actually like the whole Alice in Chains Unplugged album and a ton of Beatles was the main stuff I was focusing on for just getting more comfortable singing and playing. I could already sing and play, but some of the more complicated stuff was still eluding me. So I was working on that, and then when I started writing the Hollow Glow stuff, I just I don't know. I don't know. I just kind of let it flow without thinking about it. And at that time, at that specific point in time, I was actually writing all my stuff in a recording program called Nuendo. I would actually, write chunks of it and be able to listen to it back, like write a verse and be able to listen to it and be like, all right, this melody line's not working, that one's not working. And I would the first batch of songs, the first 2 albums I recorded with a Hollow Glow were just me doing that. It was just me playing all the instruments and just writing songs in the recording program, really just so I could hear what it sounded like as I was doing it. And yeah, that's Out of the Darkness was the first album, and Into the Light was the second album, and they sound the way they sound because I was just I was just fiddling around, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and that, of course, this is a singer spotlight, but I actually want to touch on the guitar playing too. And I hope you don't take any offense to this, but in Ra, it's really, really good songs and some really cool solos, but they are contained. They're smart solos, don't get me wrong, but when I heard your stuff, like A Dream, your first solo album, I was like, wow, you tell me that you have influences like Joe Satriani, and all of a sudden I can hear it. It's like Vinnie Vincent was in Kiss, and they kept a lid on it, but as soon as he did Vinnie Vincent Invasion, it was all over the place. Not that makes you, that's much better because you can play a lot faster, but I did notice, like on your own material, it sounded to me like there was more soloing freedom. Am I completely wrong, or?
Well, it depends on the project, because I guess I played for the project. Ron, at the point in time where when we were forming what we were, I was listening to a lot of bands like Korn and Tool and all the other current stuff that was going on. And there wasn't a lot of guitar solos, and that's what I was way into at the time. Tool was my absolute favorite band. In the late '90s, early 2000s, Tool and Korn was my absolute favorite band for a while. When I first discovered them, I was living in LA, and they were just their second album was just starting to blow up. And as soon as I found that album, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And at the time, I was studying a lot of jazz and fusion, and I was like, screw that stuff. This is amazing, with the 7-string guitars
Yeah.
and the heavy tunings. But they came out and did differently with it. It wasn't just riffs. They were adding textures.
Yeah.
A lot of dissonance and a lot of cool sound effects, but done very tastefully. And if you listen to Ra, you can hear there's definitely a lot of that influence. Especially in the earlier Ra stuff. On the first album, I was doing a lot of sound effects work.
Yeah.
Some of the odder noises with melodic sense too, with the brain of someone that went to to Berkeley.
No, I could definitely hear that, and I understand it. It wasn't, of course, I know you're not taking it wrong, but it wasn't. It was like, oh, that's all he can play. I could hear, it's like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing, but it is contained within that song.
The instrumental album, I kind of did one just as I was teaching myself to record. I did an instrumental album that I didn't really push a lot in 2004. Just an EP with five tracks on it, just messing around. It was really more just to help me get better at learning to record. I released it and I sold it, but I didn't really push it. But then, A Dream Between Two Fires was the instrumental album that I wanted to make, because when I was in high school and out through college, I was very much driven. I used to practice 5 to 8 hours a day, sometimes even more. I can play well. I just got to the point where I started to feel like all that crazy guitar playing stuff. At some point in my life, it started to sound like people are playing finger exercises instead of writing music. So I kind of started getting in. That's when I started getting away from some of the rock music into jazz and fusion, and then I discovered Korn, and I was like, all right, there's more to guitar than just being technically proficient at it and being able to play over chord changes, which I was excited about at the time. And yeah, Korn was a favorite band of mine for a very short amount of time, but I think that they definitely had a very profound effect on me. I definitely could say that they're a band that had a lot of influence on me, but they're not a band I listen to very often these days, ever. It's been years since I've listened to Korn, but at the time it had a profound effect on me, and so then when I was you know, when I was getting my own rock band, it was definitely more in that line. I wasn't too worried about guitar solos. I was doing more textures, and you know, every once in a while I would do a solo just because I could. But I, you know, and especially, you know, on the first rock album, I didn't really play anything very complicated. You know, some of the rhythms are more complicated than some of the solo stuff. The solo stuff was just playing what the song needed. You know, there isn't really many shred guitar solos in Raw, but there, you know, on the B-sides record, the song Baghdad has probably one of the coolest guitar solos I ever wrote, which was, it was just a fairly short one, just some crazy finger tapping stuff.
That's cool.
But yeah, so then you know, an instrumental album was something I always had told myself that I would do. So I you know, I worked on A Dream Between Two Fires over the course of from 2006 to 2009, off and on. And you know, I was actually wasn't really off and on. It was like I recorded half of it in 2006 and half of it in 2009. In 2006, I recorded all the heavy stuff, and in the period of 3 years after that, I started getting away from heavier music, and the more textural stuff in 2000 was recorded in 2009.
So,
And
no, go ahead. Sorry.
it says, and you know, and then, you know, once I released that album, or I was gearing up to release it, you know, I was practicing them so I could get something together to go play it live, and I fell up some stairs and dislocated my finger, couldn't play guitar for like 4 months.
So let's learn voice.
Yeah.
Now, since you had this little finger thing going on, and you said a minute ago you used to practice 5 to 8 hours a day. When we started doing lessons, how did you attack voice? Because as a vocalist, you grew really quick. I mean, I get emails all the time, singers saying, how long will it take me to come from here to here? But I remember you saying, oh, it was a little bit of a struggle, and your range started getting better. You started getting more confidence. So were you practicing 2 hours a day, 6 hours a day? How did you attack this beast to learn, become so proficient so quick?
I was attacking it, you know, I think I practiced as much as I could take it. You know, I tried not to hurt my voice, but I was also approaching it with the stuff you taught me, but also doing it smartly. You know, being a professional musician that had already, you know, gone to school for music, I understand the concept of mastering an instrument, whether it's your voice or a guitar. Some of the same concepts are in there. The mechanics are completely different between the voice and the guitar, but the same principles apply, as in not just playing the exercises, but seeing what the exercises are actually doing and then expanding on that. I think that's important no matter what instrument you're playing. You know, why are you working on these exercises? Don't just run them without thinking about it. For me, focus has always been a very important part of being a practicing musician, because this is something I talk about with my students all the time. You know, you can run those exercises just to get through them while you're thinking about what you watched on TV last night, and you probably get a little bit out of it. Or you can sit down and focus, and really focus on what you're doing, being in the moment, and being, you know, watching how you're making the motions, the you know, with guitar, the changes you're making between the fingers, and understanding what you're doing there and trying to refine that. And with the voice, understanding how it feels, where it's coming from, and how it feels more comfortable, and refining it that way. And with that focus, you make, you know, 3,000 times more progress in a short amount of time.
Ben, that is probably the best response I've ever gotten in a singer spotlight. That was amazing. Yeah, because a lot of singers, they hate the scales, and I can't remember if we were doing vocal power scales or isolation exercises, probably a little bit of both. But a lot of singers, they just do want to run through it instead of actually being there. And even on something as simple as a basic siren or something, and noticing how it feels internally. What it's doing, you know, your breathing support, thinking about all that stuff as you're doing it. You know, most singers just run right through it. So that singers that who are watching this, that was a gold nugget that he just gave you. If you want to improve, you got to pay attention. So, when you did start practicing and working really hard, what improved for you?
With voice, it's much more of an internal feeling. With guitar, it's external, and it's in your fingers, and you can see what's going on. With voice, for me, I really had to pay attention to how it felt, because the subtlest placement difference I noticed could make my voice sound much fuller. And I'm not a vocal instructor, so I don't. You could probably tell me what I was doing differently. But at the time, I was just playing around, and I'm sure being a bodily function, one of the more pleasant ones. Singing is probably a little bit different for everybody. I'm sure it's not exactly the same mechanics, but I just kind of found the place where I felt like it was working for me, and then I would write down notes. All right, think about it in terms of placing it a little bit more from here. I mean, I probably have the notes written down on my lessons, and I would try and work with that. And the same way I approach guitar is try, when it works, try and keep it working, but forget about it. Make it become muscle memory. That's another thing I work on a lot with my students, is the basic mechanics and things like that. You absolutely need to have that, but you absolutely do not want to be thinking about it as well.
And that's the second best response I've ever had in one of these singer spotlights. See, it's good that you're a guitar coach, because you're relaying this very, very well. So did you notice, what about your stamina, your range? Did you already have good range, good stamina, or did they increase, did they decrease as you studied voice?
I think I already had a pretty good range, but it definitely increased. And one thing that definitely, my stamina as I sang more, definitely, like with anything you do, the more I did it, the more stamina I had. It's just a matter of doing it like whether you're running or you're practicing scales or whatever you're doing. When you're using your body, you have to work with the muscles and get them to work in the way that you want them to work. And it just happened over time, because I went from just recording, working on songs in a recording program, and very shortly after that I put together a live band. And that was a completely different situation. When I first started doing that, I would go home and I would be a little bit hoarse, and I was like, man, this sucks. I'm doing, because I'm struggling to get my voice out, so I basically pushing harder than I need to, just so I could hear it.
Yeah.
And so that was came time for a completely different approach. At the same time, that probably strengthened my voice, because I was singing much harder than I had been in the past, but I was singing a little bit too hard. And per your advice, I actually got the TC Helicon personal monitor, and that helped a lot for a little while. Just being in a situation, in Raw, I wore in-ear monitors, and I could always hear myself perfectly. And cut to a band that doesn't roll with the crew in in-ear monitors, I had to do it all myself. So that's couldn't work with in-ears, because working in a club situation where you're a quasi-local band, you don't get very much special attention. So your monitor mix is probably going to be what the monitor mix was when the guy turned on the PA system. Mine is whatever tweaks you can get out in less than a minute. So that little TC Helicon unit helped me a lot for a while, but then I started developing techniques of where I stood in relation to the drum set and how I aimed my guitar amp. And I stopped using the TC Helicon monitor, and I started not getting anything else through my monitor except for vocals. And I would aim my amplifier a different way, so that I could, by not having my amplifier blasting at me, which all my years as a guitarist is exactly what I did, had my amp blasting at me because I wanted to be able to hear it. I actually turned it to the side, which, coming out in front of house, it doesn't really matter. It probably makes people's lives in the front row much easier, because they're not getting their heads blown off by my amp. And getting off to the side, by tilting it, I could control the volume level. So I got it that way, and that way I could get all vocals out of my monitor and could hear myself well. But just picking up tricks like that, that's not a stamina thing, but I think that goes hand in hand with stamina, so you don't hurt your damn voice.
No, that's a very, very good tip. And you started playing these gigs, and you had said earlier, it got better the more you played, but you did have, like you said, some issues being the front man, where you were used to being behind Sahaj. So those first couple of gigs, how did you handle that? I mean, if it was still an issue, how did you get through it?
I don't know.
You just did it.
Yeah, just stepping up and doing it.
Box rescue.
I'm sure. I'm sure the first set of gigs I did, I was probably scared out of my mind. Getting up there and being the front man in the band for the first time, and I'm sure it looked fine, because I'd played hundreds of shows, if not more, in my life. You know, lived years of my life on the road. So playing a show was comfortable, but being a front man was a little bit different. But I think it's just a matter of being rehearsed well enough that you can run the show without having to think about it. Because I guess that's probably what helped the most. You know, in a band situation, same whether you're playing songs in a band or you're practicing, running it to the point where it becomes somewhat muscle memory. This is something I did a lot in Ra as well. Different instrument, the same thing. Getting the songs down well enough so that you don't even have to think about them. You're not worried about blowing the line in the second verse. It's just there, and it's muscle memory for the most part. And you can focus on putting on a show. You know, in Ra, my hands automatically, I don't even have to think about what I'm playing. I'm more worried about if I'm going to break my ankle jumping off the drum riser. And you know, the same thing with singing in a rock band is just being rehearsed well enough that when you take the stage, you're not worrying about that stuff. Obviously, you always have that little thing in your mind going, "Oh my God, I'm going to screw this up, I'm going to screw this up." But then when you hit the stage, you know, me personally, and I'm sure with most people, when you're there and you're standing in front of an audience, the feeling of it completely changes, and you're not thinking about it anymore. You're just doing it, and that's where having it rehearsed to the point where it will just flow for you. But if you're you know, and you know, every once in a while we did play a song where I still had to think about stuff, but for the most part, everything we played was very well rehearsed. You know, we used to rehearse it in the early days of the Hollow Glow. I was like, you know, rehearsing 3 days a week with the band, the Slave Driver.
That's cool. I gotta say, I love the Hollow Glow. I think you're a very unique singer. I don't think you sound like anybody else. But I gotta know, does Jeff Buckley influence you at all?
Yeah, quite a lot, but only because you actually told me that you reminded me of him. I'd heard the name, you know, in Berkeley. A lot of people were listening at the time. I wasn't, and you know, at that time, a lot of people were talking about him, and I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I went to the record store, and I bought an album from him, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna check this out. And it was actually Sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk, and I was like, oh, this isn't that good.
Yeah, it was
Because it was the
completely
one
different.
that I didn't know at the time. It was actually just the new one, and I bought it, and I was like, this is kind of terrible. And so I never got into Jeff Buckley, and then you told me that I reminded him of you a little bit, and then I bought Grace, and you know, that's where it's at. That album is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, it's the only album he actually recorded when he was alive. The other stuff is all just demos, which probably shouldn't have been released.
Yeah, I think it was just for the fans who loved it. And I bought that album, and being a Buckley fan, I liked it, but I know exactly where you're coming from. If I had not known Jess Buckley and I would have bought Sketches, I'd have been like, yeah, you know, it's not the same as songs like Grace or you know, Last Goodbye.
But there are other, you know, Live at Sine is great, and I did an acoustic album a year and a half ago, and I actually covered a cover that he does called Calling You.
That's cool. That's cool. So, you know, and I mentioned this earlier. Well, I want to jump back really quick, but then I want to move on to the singing bowls because I saw you posted an audio that just blew me away. But when the last Raw album came out, I have to mention this. There was a song on there called "A Hollow Glow," and I swear I had to listen to it for a minute. I was, to be honest, we have a flat roof, and I was shoveling snow off my roof, and "A Hollow Glow" came on, and I'm like, wait a minute. That sounds like Ben, but it sounds like it's Sahaj. But is that Ben? Is that Sahaj? I don't know whether he listened to A Hollow Glow and it influenced him by listening to your voice. Something went on with that song. As I'm listening to the way he did the harmonies and everything, it just had that feeling that it was inspired by you. And so Sahaj ought to thank you for giving him a voice lesson. But am I completely wrong, or was that like an homage to you with your own band?
Well, I mean, this song "A Hollow Glow" was definitely about the Hollow Glow, and I think it was I don't even, you know, I haven't listened to that album in a little while. I don't even remember what it sounds like, that song, to be honest with you. But I'm sure it was I think you might be thinking of a different song, because I think "A Hollow Glow" is actually an instrumental track on on that album.
Maybe it's right before then.
But yeah, it might be right before it, and I don't even remember what song it is, to be perfectly honest. But it was definitely it was definitely kind of a homage to the Hollow Glow. You know, Sahaj was.
Well, there was one thing I'm actually trying to.
I think it was, and I wrote the music to it, and I don't know. We recorded that album in 2012. It seems like 1,000 years ago.
Right, maybe it was Ecstasy. It was right around a Hollow Glows too. So there was just like these harmonies, a little bit of vocals. It wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was a Hollow Glow. I have to go back and listen. Now you're making me look bad.
I think that's an instrumental, but yeah, I'm the one that looks bad because I don't even remember what the songs
songs. Come on. Okay, so you went from there. You got into singing bowls, which is very therapeutic. But you had posted this audio within the last year, and it's just you. It sounds like you're outside, and there's this natural echo. And you're doing these little licks with your voice, just free, just ahs and this, and it was so beautiful. It was so like relaxing. Do you remember what I'm talking? You probably did 20 of those by now, so you're probably not for sure which one I'm talking about. But how did you get into that? What kind of led you in that direction?
Well, I guess it's been a slow progression over the past 10 years, you know, like I was talking about with between recording a Dream Between Two Fires and you know, recording it in two chunks. My musical tastes were getting you know, as I felt a little bit successful in music, it allowed me to continue exploring more. I you know, like with in the early days, it was like playing rock music, and I was driven to be in a rock band that was touring, and you know, that was the main focus of my life for years. You know, then once you do that and you spend several years of your life on the road, well, once I did that and spent several years of my life on the road, it started to get a little boring doing the same exact thing. You know, especially I'm a very versatile musician. I studied everything from jazz to, you know, I play everything from, I don't play jazz anymore, but I studied jazz and fusion and played a lot of hard rock, really hard rock, and a lot of really mellow rock. And in between 2006 and 2009, I was actually a member of a band called Jediah, which was kind of like a U2 Coldplay-ish kind of band. And you know, because that's the direction my musical tastes were going at that period of time, because my musical tastes seems to have gone from, you know, when I really got into Korn, when kept going softer and softer and softer until I was listening to a lot of softer music. And then from there, from 2009 to present day, you know, I've gone from listening to that mainstream softer music to a lot of meditation music kind of stuff, and then discovering people who channel sound like Tom Kenyon, who, if you've never seen the movie Song of the New Earth, it's absolutely awesome. And just a natural progression of being a musician that also listens to a lot of music, and just, you know, I can't listen to the same thing for 15 years, so always discovering new stuff and getting into, you know, then, you know, I hang out with, here in Maine, I you know, my life is completely different than what it was when I lived in New York City or LA. You know, I have friends that were doing singing bowl concerts and things like that, and I would go, and I absolutely loved the singing bowls. Then when I discovered Tom Kenyon, who plays one singing bowl and sings with it, I was like, oh my God, that's really cool. So I was like, I want to try that. So I actually bought, you know, there's a shop that's in Maine that had a singing bowl sale. So I bought a singing bowl just to test it out, and I would sing with it, and I really liked it. So then I immediately bought 8 more singing bowls. So I had a full scale, you know, I had C to C tuned to A432 perfect pitch singing bowls so I could sing with them. And the recordings that you heard were almost every day. I haven't been as religious with it lately, but almost every day for quite a while, I would you know, set up the singing bowls and just do a sound meditation with them. Just every morning or early afternoon, I would just sing openly and freely with them, because it was like a meditation, but an easy way to shut off my mind, because I've meditated every day for years and years. But that was a different way, because a lot of times when you're meditating, you're like, all right, I got to pay this bill next, and I got a student coming up in an hour. When am I going to teach him? But you know, when I sit down and I sing with the singing bowls, it's like you're focused on singing. You know, when it's something like that, I'm not singing a song. I'm just singing freely, just whatever happens. It's a very easy way to be in the moment. And you know, every time I set them up, I have a nice pair of stereo microphones, AKG C414s. And I just always record. Every single time I set up my bowls, I record it. It's just I decided to get into that habit when I got them, just to have. And so, I mean, I released a few excerpts of that. It's just completely improvised. You know, I didn't really release an album, but I put together an album's worth of stuff and put it together as a download and sold some of it just to see what the reaction would be, and people liked it. But right now, I'm actually working more on a project where I'm working with the singing bowls and voice, but also, you know, with a lot of electronic elements as well. I have a lot of amazing plugins for my recording program. You know, the full Contact library, or the full Complete library, and doing a lot of stuff with percussion and you know, synths and piano and all that layered on top of singing bowls. And you know, it's just kind of going from being in the band heavily influenced by Korn to playing playing with singing bowls, and you know, that's quite a large leap, I suppose. But when it happens over the course of 10 years, it just seems, in my mind, it was a natural progression. In my case, it was a natural progression. Just got sick of
I actually, like I told you earlier, before this interview, I used to listen to Celtic music like Lorena McKenna, who was amazing. In fact, when Evanescence came out, when the first song came out, I thought, what is Lorena McKenna doing singing a rock song? It threw me for a minute. I was like, wait a minute. Now, you had mentioned something earlier about the bowl. It's 432 hertz.
Yeah.
So why? I mean, actually want to address something, because there are some new age thought. I understand the purpose of 432. I don't personally, and you can disagree with me, it's fine. As a coach, I don't think if I tuned my piano to 432 and made someone do singing scales, or tuned raw to 432 before Sahaj sang in the studio, that it's going to revolutionize his singing. You know, I understand the effects, but I don't think it changes how well you become a player. But what are your thoughts on that? Why 432? How has it affected your voice when you sing in 432 as opposed to 440 hertz?
Well, these days I actually, you know, I actually do some public speaking on this, which you might not even know. No. So I actually know this subject pretty well, and we could talk about this for actually a couple hours, but to make it brief, some of the inherent tones of the universe, you know, we live in a physical world, but the physical world is an illusion, and it's not just new age thought anymore, because quantum physics has actually proven this. You know, there's a lot of very odd things that happen in the quantum world if you take it from a materialistic point of view. To keep it short, understanding a tone that has been around for many years, that people have been tuning instruments to. Instruments in Indian temples are tuned to is a frequency 136.1 hertz, which is the frequency of Om, which most people have probably heard of Om. And that is, as it's taught in a lot of cultures, is the inherent resonance in this universe. That frequency is the universe, is the resonance in which our universe is actually vibrating and functioning. And then I actually, you know, there's a lot of things, but keep it some of the most interesting points. A man named Hans Cousteau developed a system of a mathematical equation for finding out related hertz frequencies for celestial events, and it just so happens that the frequency of the Earth's rotation around the sun worked out to be exactly 136.1 hertz. Wow. Which is really interesting. And I've been learning stuff. I, I don't know how, it's hard to just give it in a few seconds, but I've been studying with quite an amazing person. And some of the stuff we've been studying is the effects of vibration and the effects of how our reality is formed. And, you know, in my case, we've been working on specific vibrations. And if what I've been learning is correct, it's, you know, well, you know, each of our emotions comes from a vibrational standpoint. And it just so happens that the emotion, as I was taught, the emotion of compassion is 544 hertz. That's the resonant frequency of it. It's not like you play that pitch and you get that feeling. And it just so works out that that is also that's the same exact note as ohm. It's actually just two octaves above, which in 432 tuning it's exactly a C sharp. It's a C sharp note. It's actually in 432.1 hertz tuning, but tuners aren't that exact. Well,
wait a minute now.
There's a lot
My
of
tuner,
information.
tuned XD, is actually that accurate. But go ahead.
Sweet. There's a lot of information out there about this, and there's a lot of information that I've been taught that is not is prevalent about this, and it's really interesting. You know, is it going to make you be able to sing crazy licks easier? I don't think so. But when you're dealing with music that you're intentionally trying to affect someone's mood, I think it does have an effect, because you're dealing with a frequency range that is more in line with the universe. You know, if you buy into that, because if you don't buy into it, I think, you know, what we buy into is a lot of what we allow to ourselves to create for ourselves. So if you don't buy into it, you might get a little bit out of it, but if you're into it, maybe you'll get more. I don't know. I'm not trying to, you know, it is what it is, and I enjoy it. So
no, I'm there with you. I have no problem with that, or tuning to 432. I've heard about it for 20-something years, but you know, there has been a new wave of, hey, if you tune and sing in 432, you're going to be a better singer. I don't believe that's the case. You know, as with any instruments, you have to learn the instruments and play it. So, you know, typically a lot of my students do sing in 432, but I'm playing in 440, so they're just singing flat.
Sweet.
Some of them sing in 448, you know, because they sing sharp. But yeah. Well, Ben, it's been great. Do you have any last words of advice? Someone comes to your concert, not a Raw concert, but to a Ben Carroll concert, and they love your voice and they want some advice on becoming a professional singer or starting that road. What would you, and this is not about me, you know, you could say, oh, you go study with Jamie. It's not about that. It's about what you and what you've learned as a singer. What advice would you offer them?
I would say be honest with yourself. Be objective with your own music. You know, as a musician standpoint, be honest with yourself. Play stuff that you want to play. Don't just play for ambition, because there's a difference there. You know, when you're just playing for ambition, if you're not playing something you love, then I think you don't have the same emotional delivery. And from an industry standpoint, as an industry you have to kind of try to survive in these days, be really objective with your music. You know, don't just write one song and be like, all right, I have a hit. Write 50 songs to find the one song. That you know, that is the best advice I think I could give. You know, that's the advice I always hear Sahaj give is be objective with your music, and that's something that, you know, I've done a lot in the past, is write a lot of songs and throw them away. Yeah. Not necessarily that they're all crap, but, you know, sometimes you want to find the better ones. So, and so, you know, when it comes to songwriting is something, some people are inherently good at it, but it's also something that's learned. You know, it's something that the more you do it, the better you're going to get out of it. And yeah,
absolutely. Actually, I have a lesson in my vocal academy where I give them a month to write 50 songs.
Wow.
Yeah, but, you know, let's be honest. you write 50 songs or maybe one good one. And I'm just talking about the basic lyrics, the basic chord progression. Doesn't have to be nothing fantastic, but the point of the exercise is to get all these songs done and take a look and see how you've grown. What do you connect to? What chord changes kind of connect? So it's just like skeletons of songs, but that's how they begin, you know, and then you start to find out who you are as a songwriter. Ben, what if people want to buy your music? What if they want to study with you, or they want to take a guitar lesson because you, although you're not a vocal coach, you're a singing guitar player, which means you do have a lot to offer singers as well, who are trying to figure out how to strum that guitar and sing at the same time. How can they get a hold of it?
Through my website, bencarrollmusic.com. There's windows to all the facets of my life there. Yeah, and you know, I don't teach singing, but I do have some students that work on singing and playing with. Absolutely.
How do you spell that? Just to be clear.
bencarrollmusic.com.
Yeah. I didn't want him to look for Christmas Carol or something like that. So. Well,
I spell Ben with a silent H.
Yeah. Oh, this is why I love you. I miss singers. We spent a lot of time together. You know, from 2009 through 2011 or so. We were constantly together online.
Yeah, for like hours a day when we were working on Rockstar 360.
Yeah, and it's like, bam! But that was a good experience. It really helped me with putting my academy together and growing. So, Ben, it's always a pleasure to have you. You know, I love you to death, and I'm sure that this interview will help to open a lot of singers' minds. You actually had a lot of good responses, which I think every singer needs to take in. So thanks for being here. And singers, we'll see you in the next Singer Spotlight.
Thank you.